Good day, District Heights. This is Jonathan Medlock, your commissioner, coming to you with our first installment of Education Connection. Education Connection seeks to bring the educational system to our city, county, and our nation. First segment that I have a great guest. This is Dr. Monique Chisholm. Dr. Chisholm is with the Department of Education, and she has a lot of information, a wealth of information that she's going to share with us about what is the Department of Education and what they do. So really quick, Dr. Chisholm, I want you to first say thank you for being here and being a part of the show, and ask you, really to introduce yourself. Who are you, and what do you do with the Department of Education?
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and talk with you. I currently serve as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Programs in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. But essentially what it means is that we focus on pre-K through 12 policies and programs and work directly with states and educators across the nation to make sure that there's equity and access for all students.
Absolutely. That is absolutely wonderful. One of the big and main reasons why I wanted to get you here now, this is very pivotal, is that our 2016-2017 school year has started. So I think we're a week or 2 weeks into the school year in Prince George's County. And I think it's very important that the students and the parents or guardians have some tips in moving into this first year. What tips can you provide them so they can know what to do, how to navigate this whole school year?
That's a great question. So I have 4 tips, actually.
4? Okay, great.
4 tips.
Awesome.
And I like the way that you approach that, because really when we think about improving education outcomes for students, it really is a collective effort. It's not only the teacher and the principal and the school board and doing their roles and responsibilities, but it's the parents and the caregivers and the community members that are supporting the students. And so we all have a role in making sure that our students are successful.
Yeah, it seems like you're talking about that village.
The village. It takes a village.
It takes that village.
It definitely takes a village.
Wow.
So the first tip for our parents and our caregivers is to make sure you visit the school. And so this can be simple things from, if your child is walking to school, making sure that you know that route, you know where the crossing areas are, you know where the safety patrol is, you know where the police officers might be, pointing those things out for your student, letting them know where the safe spaces are. So just making sure you know the route to school. Even if they're taking the bus, making sure that you know the bus route. The other thing is visit inside the school. So, go into the building, figure out what the policies are for entry, making sure that you follow all of those things for safety and security. But make sure, first tip, make sure to visit the school.
Yeah, so you want to make yourself familiar with everything surrounding the school system, where your kid goes, the route. Oh yeah, okay, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. So tip 2, make sure to introduce yourself to the teacher and establish a relationship. So this is probably one of the most important aspects of the relationship of making sure that your child is on track. So reach out to your student's teacher, find out how they like to communicate. So some teachers might like to receive emails. Some teachers might be okay with text messages. Some teachers might prefer that you come into the building and have a face-to-face meeting. But make that outreach, make that connection to the teacher, and find out how they like to communicate. Don't wait until something happens, like where your student is in trouble or there's a problem or a circumstance. But make sure you're establishing that rapport and that connection right away. And for our older students, for our middle school and our high school students, parents, it's really important also to get to know that school counselor, because that school counselor is going to play a pivotal role in your child's education future.
Yeah. Sometimes our older students don't want to talk to the parents. They get to that point where they don't talk, but they will talk to the counselor.
Yes.
And through that, you can get the chance to understand the information of what's happening with your student.
Right.
It's good to have a rapport, especially with like you said earlier, with your teachers.
Yes.
For these children to have a rapport with, for the parents to have a rapport with their teachers, so the teachers know that the parent cares. It's that symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Okay, so tip 3 is to make homework a priority, right? So homework, I know that there's a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different debates about homework, but for right now, homework is here to stay. And so we need to make sure that we make that a priority in our homes for our students and our children. And so first off, make it a daily routine, right? And so make it as you brush your teeth in the morning and as you make your bed in the morning, make it a habit, a routine, so that homework becomes part of that daily practice.
Yeah, with me in raising my two sons, it became a culture.
Right.
It became the culture of homework and routine and education. So making that part as a priority, make it a part of your culture. This everyday thing, like you said, brushing your teeth and combing your hair.
Absolutely.
You do it; it's automatic. So
yeah, you also want to make sure that you're prioritizing a space in the home for your child to have dedicated and uninterrupted time for homework, right? And so if that's if it's an office space, or if it's at the kitchen counter, or if it's in the living room, making sure that they have a dedicated space where they can have uninterrupted time. If you don't have that in your home, it's great to go to the public library.
absolutely.
So our libraries are also great places to make sure that kids are having that time and that space for education.
Absolutely, and that's a great point too, creating that space. A lot of kids go home and don't have that space in their homes at this point in time to have that quiet space, the time to really think and focus on their education and doing what's necessary. And I think it's important too, it's incumbent upon us as elected officials sometimes and community members to really create that space for these young people, because we can't just rely on the federal government to come in and make it all better.
Right. If there was actually a way that there's a community space, community center, where kids could go after school and there would be mentors or coaches or people there to help to support them, that would be great and phenomenal.
Wonderful.
So my last tip, it relates to reading. So I know, Commissioner Medlock, that you've heard the importance of reading to your kids every day.
Every single day.
But it's for a reason. Actually, what studies show us is that if you look at low-income students and more affluent or higher income students, that when low-income students start school, that there is a 30 million word gap.
30 million.
30 million. 30 million words fewer that our low-income students have when they go into school in comparison to their more affluent peers. And one of the ways to help to solve this problem is by reading to your child every single day. And so at least 20 minutes a day, but every day. And if you have older kids that don't necessarily want you to, crawl into bed and read them a bedtime story anymore, what you can do is think of things like current events or social issues or topics that you guys can discuss, at different points during the week, and make sure that you're engaging in different ways that they can read and get information about those topics.
I mean, how early, once again, should you start reading with your children?
Oh gosh, like in the womb.
In the womb.
Yeah, fathers
Really?
and mothers can
Wow.
start reading to their kids, but definitely as soon as they, are born, from birth to 3 is the most important time to make sure that we are cultivating and helping our kids to grow. But you also want to create that love of learning, right? Because if you're not learning, then you're not growing. And so setting that culture and that expectation that you talked about in the home is so important to make sure that we are creating that culture and that love for learning. So those are my 4 tips. I think that if we remember that it is really important for us to support our students, that their number one job is being a student, and so the things that we do to support them and make them successful are very important.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree with you more. Well, thank you very much. We're going to go to break now, and we'll be back with our second installment of Education Connection.
Green, green, green. It's your home, it's your dream. Radon testing, keep it healthy and clean. Make it green, green, green.
Making it green is making sure the air in your home is healthy for your family to breathe. Make sure you test your home for the presence of radon. It's easy. To learn more, call 866-730-GREEN. Preserve your family's health and well-being. Get your home tested. Now that's living healthy and green.
Green, green, green. It's your home, it's your dream. Radon testing, keep it healthy and clean. Make it green, green, green.
To learn more, call 866-730-GREEN.
And we're back. I have on this show Dr. Monique Chisholm with the Department of Education. We were talking earlier about the introductions and what the policies were. And now we're going to talk about the new law. There's a new law that replaces No Child Left Behind. This is called Every Student Succeeds Act. I think this was passed by President Obama in December 2015.
Absolutely.
And I'm not really sure too many people are familiar with it, so I want you to give me some insight, and the residents of this county some insight.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. So you're familiar with No Child Left Behind,
Very much
right?
so.
And we had No Child Left Behind was in place for about 15 years. And it was the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was signed into law by President Johnson in 1965. But one of the things that we know is that with all the criticism of No Child Left Behind, there were some good things that actually happened as a result of No Child Left Behind. You know, one of the first things is that it moved us to a focus on standards. And so making sure that across the nation we had standards for what we wanted our children to know and be able to do. It also then ushered in, information about how students were performing. And so not only just looking at how students were performing at the school level, but to disaggregate the data. And really all that means is to look at different student groups, right? So to look at race and ethnicity and to look at income status and say, how are kids doing in reading and how are kids doing in math? And what it allowed us to do is to see significant achievement gaps. And so we could see that our black male students were, maybe 30 percentage points behind the all student group in the school. And so it really helped us focus in on what we needed to do. A lot of people criticized No Child Left Behind because it was a one-size-fits-all accountability model, which really meant that, as you identified your gaps and the places where you were not progressing, it was important to put in place interventions. And many times those interventions did not fit the school climate or the school culture or the school environment. It was a one-size-fits-all.
Absolutely. So we can't, as a community, just leave it in your hands to do the job that we collectively should be doing ourselves. For one, we have a elementary school, Title I elementary school here in District Heights, that our children are doing a great job, but they can do a better job. How does this new law affect Title I schools?
That's a great question. And so Title I is intimately at the core of every Student Succeeds Act. And so many of the provisions that will be in place are directly embedded in Title I. And so in many ways, what you'll see is that there will be a focus again on the college career ready standards. At the local level at District Heights Elementary School, what you should start to see are supports and interventions that are put in place to support students. You should see resources that are coming forth to help teachers as they engage in their day-to-day practices, and also to support the principal in their day-to-day practices. There is a new provision of the law. It's called the Student Achievement and Academic Enrichment, and it's a Title IV, Part A, and it really focuses on a well-rounded education. And there are three components to that: academic enrichment, focusing on safe and healthy schools, and then also technology. And so the essence of that is really that you have to have arts, and you have to have foreign languages, and you have to have social studies and science and environmental education. And in addition, you really need to make sure that your schools are safe and healthy schools, where students are, it's free from bullying, that there's a safe environment for learning, and that their social and emotional needs are being met.
Absolutely.
And then finally, that third component, focusing on technology, making sure that there is technology available for all students, that it's part of the learning day, and making sure that that's integrated into the learning practices.
Wow. Those are great information to know. But we're gonna come back, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about what is the current landscape of education in America and the United States, not just America, but abroad. Let's talk about that. So we'll be back shortly to talk about more to Dr. Monique Chisholm from the U.S. Department of Education.
You're going to need me. You're going to need us. All of us. You're going to need our help with your water, your air, your food. You're going to need our determination, our compassion. You're going to need the next generation of leaders to face the challenges the future will bring. And we promise we'll be there when you need us.
Welcome back to Education Connection. I'm your host, Jonathan Medlock. We were here talking today about education and the role of education in our states and within our country. One of the things that, I need to get loose and really talk about. I'm not an educator. I am an elected official. And for those of the common people who don't understand how the structure of education works and what is this whole thing, So I want to talk about the current landscape of education, but let's bring it down a level to those who, like me, who want to understand it from layman's terms. I have a lot of parents who come to talk to me and say, you know what, Mr. Medlock, the education system is horrible. What is actually happening here? What's happening to our children, our babies, and the educational, climate in this country is horrible. When you talk to the person on the street, so what's happening? What is the landscape of education? What's happening? What's moving forward? What are we doing?
That's a great question. So let me start off with some positive things.
Well, let's
start with the positive
Okay.
things first. So we actually have the highest graduation rate that we've had in decades. So we have 82% of our students who are graduating from high school. That's phenomenal.
That's a lot.
We
I
still
didn't know
have
that.
a long way to go to get to 100% of students, but 82% is the highest that we've had in decades. There's also, one of the ways that we can measure progress is by looking at the assessments. Now, assessments aren't, the end-all, be-all for everything. You definitely have to have other measures. But there's a national assessment that's in place. It's called the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And that provides a snapshot and lets us know how our students are doing across the nation. So there's a sampling of students from each state that are selected, and they're tested at grades 4 and grades 8. And what we know is that on the National Assessment of Educational Progress in both reading and math, that our scores have improved. And this is actually a benchmark against other countries across the nation. So,
Okay. Not just our states here, but we're talking about globally.
well, actually, yeah, not just Maryland, but it lets us know that from Maryland to Indiana to Wisconsin to California, that our students in grades 4 and 8 in math and reading are making progress in both reading and math.
Well, that's very interesting. But when I talk to parents and I see the educational system, and most parents say, they're pushing our babies through school. They're pushing them. Yes, we have great numbers, 82%. That's phenomenal. But what are they learning? I think we talked about in the last half about the No Child Left Behind. They're moving forward, and we've been pushing them forward. But are we educating them? This is what the questions that are asked.
Yeah, and so when you're hearing they're pushing the students forward, are you getting the sense that they're promoting students without making sure that those students have the skills that they need?
The adequate skills they need.
Okay.
That they're not making the strides that they need to. That they don't. They're just testing just to be testing, for instance, and just to pass particular benchmarks, and not to really learn.
Right, and that's been one of the major debates in education is around over-testing. And I'm not going to go too far into that, but I think what's really important is that you have a well-rounded, balanced education system so that you're focusing on both, summative, long-range assessments, but also formative, those really quick points in time that give you information about how students are progressing. And so it's really important to have a balance. And, if we're seeing that kids are being moved on when they're not necessarily ready, then that's definitely conversations that we need to have at the local level with, the teachers and the principals and find out kind of what is the essence of what's going on and what's motivating that behavior, because we do want to make sure that our students are prepared when they graduate from college.
Absolutely. And when you talk about locally again, as a local official, being a part of the landscape of our school system, definitely creating relationships, and it starts with relationships with the principals, the administration, the parents, everyone kind of get a feel about what's happening, what's going on, and what the students need, what the needs are, how they feel. Because when I get the notion I get is that their kids aren't being properly attended to, and it's more too many students in the classroom, and it's all these other things. I know some of it can be stuff that we have to systemically take care of ourselves and realize and stuff, to move forward with. But
Right, absolutely. So, I just talked about some of the progress that we've had,
Absolutely.
Around high school graduation rates and also reading and math
That's
scores
great.
improving. We're also seeing that the dropout rate is decreasing. This is in part because of our teachers, because of the principals, because of the administrators, because of support personnel that are in schools, but also because of families and students. We are making these gains in education because of all of their involvement and their contributions. So I don't want to neglect that and say that there's a lot of work that's happened. There's a lot of progress that's been made, and it's at the hands of our every person within the system. There's also a number of things that we know that are broken about the system, and we're really fortunate at the Department of Education that we have the Civil Rights Data Collection, which gives us a number of different indicators about education equity across the nation. And so I'm going to touch on a couple of things that I think are important for us to really focus on in terms of improving education. So the first one, I talked about our improved graduation rate, so more kids are graduating. We have more kids that are going to college than ever before. In fact, we have African American and Hispanic students have increased in their college going rates by 1 million students.
Wow.
But what we're seeing is that once kids get to college, they're not necessarily prepared. So when you look at low-income students in comparison to higher-income students, we have about 1 in 7 students that are graduating from college with our low-income students, in comparison to students who come from more affluent families, where the graduation rate from college is about 60%. So we're not doing a good job with our low-income students making sure that they are prepared to succeed in college. The other thing that we also know is that once students get to college, that the remediation rate is astronomical. So when you look at schools across the nation, what we know is that for low-income students, about somewhere between 28 to 40% will have to take a remediation course. And when you look at community colleges, that's all the way up to like 50%. So this focus in the Every Student Succeeds Act on college and career readiness is really important, because what we are saying is that when you leave high school, you will be ready to go into a credit-bearing course in college and be successful.
Wow. So once again, we talk about the interchangeability of education that's from the pre-K to the 12th grade, being transferable once again to colleges now. So now you're college ready and college equipped.
Yes.
For the particular challenge, man. That is awesome. So we are heading in the right direction as an educational system.
Absolutely.
So that by itself is encouraging.
Yes.
So I definitely appreciate that particular insight, and it helps tremendously. But at this point, we're gonna take a break, and we're gonna come back, and we're gonna talk about the opportunities in closing the gaps. With this, and we've talked about we're making strides, but how do we close the gaps permanently moving forward? So once again, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back. This is Jonathan Medlock, once again, with Education Connections. Thank you.
The following is a public service announcement test to determine if you need a fishing license and boat registration before you head out on the water. Let us begin. Are you a pelican? Does this look like your house? Is this your idea of fishing with friends? Do you use your feet as fishing hooks? Are you your own boat? Do you have webbed feet? No, I mean like a... That's the one. Do you want this in your favorite lake? Yuck, yike. No thanks, mister. Regardless how you answered, you need to be licensed and registered because it helps local conservation efforts protect the very natural resources you enjoy boating and fishing in for generations to come. Do your part at takemefishing.org.
Once again, thank you for joining me. This was Education Connection with Jonathan Medlock, and I want to thank my guest, Dr. Monique Chisholm, for being with us today. Dr. Chisholm, where can people, if they have any further questions, where can they reach you?
Absolutely, and I would love to hear from people. You can reach me at monique.chisholm@ed.gov. That's just MONIQUE.Chisholm, CHISM, @ed.gov. Please feel free to email me or reach out, and I'm happy to try to help in any way that I can.
Well, once again, I truly appreciate you being here and doing what you do. So I'm going to have you back on again at some point. So.
Well, I appreciate that. That'd be great. Thanks.
And if you want to reach Dr. Chisholm, she gave you their information. Also, moving forward, I'll make sure I have the information for you. But thank you again for joining me. This is, once again, Education Connection, and I'm your host, Jonathan Medlock. Thank you.